Hi friends, Taylor here. So we are in week 3 of our series of miracles and parables. We've heard about Jesus' first miracle of turning water into wine. And last week we looked at a couple parables. These are stories that Jesus would tell the people to help them understand a lesson or a point. These were meant to make people think and contemplate their own lives. We heard about having faith as small as a mustard seed. Well, today we turn to a miracle again, and it is a favorite and one that is told about Jesus and his disciples over and over again. This one is a cool miracle, and it's unique. There are many stories in the Bible that are only told once, like the story of the Good Samaritan, or the prodigal son, or the story of the sheep and the goats. But this story, this miracle, is not merely told once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. In each of the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all have this miracle recorded in some way. It is the only miracle recorded and told in each of the Gospels. That's pretty cool, right? It must have really something to tell us. So let's read the Matthew account of Jesus feeding the 5,000. When Jesus arrived and saw a large crowd, he had compassion for them and healed those who were sick. That evening, his disciples came and said to him, "This is an isolated place and it's getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said to them, "There's no need to send them away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here except 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." He said, "Bring them here to me." He ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish, looked up to the heavens, blessed them, and broke the loaves apart and gave them to his disciples. Then the disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate and they were full, and they filled 12 baskets with the leftovers. About 5,000 men, plus women and children, had eaten. So, a little context as we look into this miracle. Right before this happens, a couple things were going on. The disciples had just returned after being sent out in groups to preach and offer healing and spread the good news about Jesus in the countryside. The disciples came back all excited and that it really worked, and they were amazed and astounded and told Jesus of all they had done. But it was also a tragedy time in Israel. According to the Gospel of Matthew, right before we hear about this miracle, word had just spread about John the Baptist being beheaded by King Herod. John the Baptist was a great spiritual leader and well known by many in the faith. Everyone was stunned by this tragedy, by this enormous loss, including Jesus, who had been baptized by John, and John was also Jesus' cousin. So it was a sad time for many. And Jesus wanted just to get away by himself, to grieve and to pray and to remember. So Jesus got into a boat to sail across Lake Galilee to a remote place, some 4 miles away, in order to get away from the massive crowds who had been following him all day, to be alone and to grieve the loss of John the Baptist. But the people followed Jesus, probably watched his boat and traveled along the shoreline to see where Jesus landed. And what was Jesus' reaction to the thousands who had shown up? Was he irritated or angry? No. He looked at the massive crowd with compassion, and Jesus continued to heal and share stories with the people that had gathered that day. But as the day went on, and it got to be later, one of the disciples said, again in verse 15, "This is an isolated place and it's getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Pretty much, the disciple was saying, "Come on, Jesus, let's send these people home. We're tired and we don't want to have to deal with it anymore. There's 0 chance of feeding this many people." But I love what Jesus responds with in verse 16. "But Jesus said to them, 'There's no need to send them away. You give them something to eat.'" Jesus then had everyone sit down on the grass, and Jesus took that bread and he looked up into the heavens, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, who then gave it to the crowds. And they all ate and they were all satisfied. And there were even 12 baskets of bread left over. They say that the number was like 5,000 men plus women and children that ate. So a couple things here. We see that with Jesus, there is always plenty to go around. He provides. He takes what seems impossible and makes it happen. So, changing gears for a minute, my favorite candy of all time is Junior Mints. Guys, this is minty goodness in dark chocolate. It's so good. So go ahead, share with somebody right now that's around you. What is your favorite candy? So my close second to Junior Mints are Mentos, the mint ones. I like the fruit ones, but the mint ones are really my jam. I literally can eat a pack of Mentos in less than a minute. I consume them like they're water. It's weird, but I love them so much. Now, Mentos aren't like a crazy popular candy, but they got quite some buzz quite a few years ago when the phenomenon of the Diet Coke and Mentos explosion took notice. So I don't drink Diet Coke anymore, but I used to. And I know I drank Diet Coke and I ate Mentos together at the same time. Whoa, right? Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, or even if you do, I think we should show you. Okay, I'm back. So you might be thinking, all right, Taylor, that was cool. But what in the world do Mentos and Diet Coke explosions have to do with our miracle and story today? Well, when Jesus feeds the 5,000, he shows us that he can take something small and turn it into something big. Small things can create a big impact. So on that day, Jesus demonstrated his love by meeting the people's most basic need of hunger. Like the Mentos, he took something small and he made it big enough into a huge meal to feed a huge crowd. Jesus was always meeting the needs of his people. He healed the blind, he cured the sick, he was a friend to the friendless. He extended grace. Again, I love it when Jesus flips on the disciples and Jesus asked, well, what do you have? What can you do? What are the needs? So what are the things that we need every day? We need food, we need water, we need a place to sleep with a roof over our heads, we need clothes, but that's not all we need. We also need love and friendship and family. We need a listening ear when we have questions. We need wisdom when we have tough choices to make. We need comfort when our hearts are broken and we don't know where to turn. Most of all, we need forgiveness from our sins, the things when we have missed the mark and we've hurt God and other people. That same Jesus is still meeting the needs of people like you and me today. So listen, friends, I believe the miracle of feeding of the 5,000 teaches us that we need community. And we can be community. This miracle, in essence, is the first example of paying it forward. And it was paid forward to the point of abundance. All they started with was 5 loaves and 2 fish, remember? But everyone left full. So here's how it looks for you and me. How can we pay it forward? How do we be a good part of community? How are we good neighbors, good friends? How are we contributing to make people full? And I'm not just talking about their stomachs, but how do we provide for one another and fill each other up? How can we help meet the needs of others? That's what being in community looks like. Jesus didn't just hand the disciples money and tell them to head to the grocery store and buy food for everybody that day. He wanted them to see what happens when we share and rely on each other. Something that starts small can end up being amazing. Listen, if a hungry crowd came to my house tomorrow and I needed to feed them, I could look in my pantry and fridge, but I guarantee you, I can't feed 10 or 20 people myself. But what I can see is what I do have. And then I can call a neighbor or a friend to see what they have to give, and so on and so forth. I can't feed 100 people, but I bet if I bring a few canned goods and you bring a few canned goods, we could stock a food pantry. See where I'm going with this? I can't build someone's house by myself, but I can work with Habitat for Humanity and get some other friends together and we can build a house and we've met someone's need. Small things can create a big impact. And when we respond with, I can do something, you guys, miracles happen and people are fed and all walk away full.